Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pagans Passionate People. And today I get to talk to with one of my friends who I hadn't seen or talked to in almost 20 years. They're a huge inspiration on me and on life and just on the output of what is going on in the theatrical world, especially for BIPOC individuals like myself. So I hope you enjoy this interview. I really had an amazing time reconnecting with someone from my past. And I hope that what I learned in the conversation and what we talked together about helps you on your journey as you try to reach your passions. So thank you. And we'll start the interview right after.
Passion, purpose, perspective, perseverance. Long ago, the four passions thrived in harmony. Then, everything changed when self-doubt, worry, fear, and societal pressures attacked. Only the passionate people, masters of the four Ps, could withstand the onslaught. But when doubts loomed darkest, they rose united, led by drive, and became Pagan's passionate people. 100 challenges passed, and the passionate people emerged as champions, fueled by their inner fire. With their collective strength, they can change the world. This is Pagan's Passionate People. And here's your host, Robert Jerome Pagan.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. And we are here with one of my passionate people, and I am so excited because I literally have not been in the same eco space or sphere with this person in almost 20 something years. And I have just been so inspired by their growth and what they have offered to not only directing and art, but to people of color, which is a huge champion for both of us. So hi, Dawn, how are you doing?
Hey, Robert, I'm good. It's so good to be here with you. It has been a really long time. Um, I'm I've been following your journey on social media too, so you're quite accomplished yourself.
I try to live up to everyone else as much as I possibly can in my own right. So I just want to like jump right into it because I know that you have a very interesting story and one that I know will connect with a lot of my viewers and a lot of people who are struggling right now because it's a weird time in the world for artists and just for people of color and just for people who want to live in this world.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just a weird time. Uh,
yeah.
and I find that nature and nurture do affect us. So I always like to start at the beginnings. So let's start with what was your early childhood like? What was that development like? Let's talk about elementary school and your family life and kind of what that looked like at the age of, 2 to like middle school. Okay.
Great.
How
Yeah.
did that look?
So, I was born in Oakland, California, and largely raised in Oakland, California. And I went to Berkeley public schools, K through 12. Um, I don't really have any memories from when I was two per se, but I but I know that we sort of settled into a house in Berkeley around the time that I was five, and my mom was then pregnant with my younger brother. I'm the oldest of four, so I have a brother that's 5 years younger than me, and then a set of siblings who are twins that are 17 years younger than me. And I knew from a pretty early age that I wanted to be in the theater. So, my sort of origin story is that my mom worked at a radio station. And when the promotional prizes, when the winners didn't come physically to the station themselves to pick them up, this was the 80s. There was no like QR code for your tickets or whatever. You had to go to the radio station and pick them up. And when winners didn't do that, then the staff got to have the promotional prizes. Um, so my mom would often get tickets to things, and the first thing that I really remember seeing was The Wiz at the Paramount Theater right there in Oakland. Stephanie Mills was on tour in the show. She was Dorothy, and that's my first memory of live theater going. And from that moment on, I was like, I want to do that. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know at that time at 6 to say I want to be an actor, but I was like, I want to do that. So, so I was in dance from a really early age. Started with dance classes and was in choir, um, really young, and I even remember doing like the third grade, like MLK Day school play, and really, really wanting to be Rosa Parks and not getting cast as Rosa Parks. So that was my first casting disappointment. I was just like random bus passenger number 7 or whatever. But for really early on, I was already into the art, and like so many of my friends, my parents got divorced in the 80s. I was about 8. I'm of that latchkey kid generation, so I had a lot of um time spent on my own with my own imagination, and as the older sibling, time spent sort of responsible for my younger brother. So so I was always sort of a storyteller, always sort of like puppets and dolls, and I definitely am one of those kids that had like tea parties with my stuffed animals, and I was writing poetry at a really young age. In fact, in 6th grade, I got the yearbook superlative for best female rapper. Um, so I think that's just because I was a poet. I think that's just because I literally could rhyme good. By the time I got to high school and people were doing like freestyle competitions, I had to tap out. I'm not a battle rapper. I'm not a freestyle rapper. Um,
But that was
but
that was like the time of rap. Like actually, that was like a big time in rap. So that was like it's a big honor. That's a badge.
it's definitely something I'm proud of, and I just sort of drop it in casually, different moments, because people are like, "You got the superlative for best female rapper," and I'm like, "I sure did. In 6th grade, I sure did." Um, so yeah, in elementary school, I did, whatever, like drama camp and stuff like that through middle school, and um, it was writing. I sort of um, was a above average student, but certainly not um, any sort of whiz kid. But like school was a nice sort of safe haven. Went to Oxford Elementary in Berkeley, and then Longfellow Intermediate School, and then King Junior High, all in Berkeley before going to Berkeley High School. So negotiating all the stuff that there's no real sob story, but when your parents get divorced, just negotiating what that means to go back and forth between two households in the 80s. My mom is white, my dad is black, so also just the like multiplicity of cultural experiences in different households and different relatives and extended families. um, but always a storyteller, always a theater maker. And then certainly by the time I um, got to high school,
We'll
I
talk
was like,
about high school in a second because I do want to
okay.
talk about growing up in elementary school because we both grew up in the Bay Area, but in drastically different areas. Castro Valley is drastically different than Berkeley, and there and, and at that time, because I grew up in the early '90s, early thousands, and I was going through the elementary school in the '90s. And the Berkeley system had always, starting in the '80s, had an Afrocentric aspect to that system. There was a lot of multicultural aspects in that system. Do you think that that is why you may have felt a little bit more of a safe haven at elementary school? I mean, for me, I didn't even know I was not white until 5th grade when someone looked at me and was like, uh, "You're not white." I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely knew I was not white at a very, very early age, um, by virtue of having a white mom and just simply not being able to like do my hair like hers, or I mean also just like physically our body types are very different and always have been, and so when I would try and like play dress up in her clothes and stuff. I was like, my mom was like a little tiny itty bitty thing. And even just playing in her makeup, being like, oh, yeah, blue eyeshadow doesn't look the same on me as it does on my mom. And these were realizations I was having, at 4. But yes, I think because Berkeley was so racially and ethnically diverse, and of course I didn't know this elementary school age, but Berkeley participates in the busing system. So everywhere in the city of Berkeley, there's school zones, and so for better or worse, you might live across the street from somebody who's actually zoned for a different school than you are, and the the idea, right, is to sort of honor these early legislative cases like Brown versus the Board of Education, where there's like full integration, and that in Berkeley with the busing system, that socioeconomic would not be a determining factor for a quality education. Now, we could have many conversations on that alone and the success or failures of that sort of program, but what it meant was we were cross fertilized across Berkeley. So people who grew up in the flats like me went to school with people who grew up in the hills or Grizzly Peak, or people that lived above the Cal campus and people who lived below Sacramento like me. We all went to school together to ultimately be dumped in the same high school because Berkeley only had one public high school. So yeah, I went to school with a wide mix of people. From starting at kindergarten, I was exposed to people that had like 2 moms, and I was exposed to, Jewish students. I remember sitting in class in the way our 4 desks were pushed together, that I remember sitting at desks with a student who were both, one was Iraqi and one was Iranian, and they both had fled from the war, and so I remember a young woman who was from Singapore, and how she was in our grade, but she was older than us. But she was older than us because they count birth year from the day you're born, and we count birth year 365 days. So from a very early age, already knowing that, like, oh, there's a whole lot of culture out here in the world. And I remember my first grade class, we would do Fridays where students would introduce something from their culture. So I remember learning how to make potato latkes in first grade, and how to make egg foo young in first grade, and fortune cookies. Like, students' parents would come and do these demonstrations for us. So I definitely think, um, because I grew up with a lot of variety of representation, and of course, there was some sort of wild mixed baby boom in the 80s. There were like so many like multiculti kids, um, that I didn't feel um, alone or isolated. I didn't feel so different. I certainly was not the only kid to have like a white parent and a black parent. I knew tons of kids who had like a white parent, a black parent, an Asian parent, a black parent. Like I said, people had 2 moms, students with different religions, students who were immigrants. Um, and so that made elementary and middle school like a really sort of soft landing. Um, and we weren't even really politicized until high school
Yeah,
to even appreciate that or have some critical inquiry about it.
because in high school, and now we can move into high school. I know Berkeley's one of the around the age that I was in high school, I know Berkeley was the only place that had 2 tracks. You could do the Afrocentric track, or you could do a Eurocentric history track. Uh, and it was a huge thing in the Bay Area, always debated about is are they doing that right? But a lot of my friends who went to that school, I've never met one black person who actually took the Afrocentric track ever, which is so weird. But I've met 3 white people who did, and they had a totally different experience in high school. So was that program around when you were in high school?
Yes. And I often will joke with people that I was a Black Studies major in high school. because at the time that I was in high school, Berkeley High was the only high school in the nation to have a Black Studies department, and that was sort of tightly generated because again, I was in high school in the early '90s, and that Berkeley High's Black Studies department grew out of that movement where San Francisco State was the first college in the nation to have a Black Studies department, and that was like in the '60s. And so that sort of had that trickle down to where we had that at Berkeley High, and I took advantage of a bunch of Black Studies classes in high school, um, while because you didn't have to decide like strictly Black studies or strictly the Eurocentric, like traditional. You could change it up. So like I took a Black literature, African American literature course, but I still had to take the requisite like world lit and English lit. And I was able to take like a Black psychology class and African American econ, and like that's one where it did like substitute, so I didn't have to take like the regular like econ or civics. I could do it in the Black Studies department. So I did a lot of vacillating between that, and I tell people all the time, you know, like because I'm really race positive, so I am like really pro Black. Like I am a proud Black woman, and anytime somebody tells me that like, oh, you're kind of intense, I was like, oh, you should have known me in high school, because in high school I was like militant. Like in high school I was like, I will not read the Scarlet Letter. That is racist. That is sexist. I will, I would definitely was like, why do we spend 19 weeks all on Europe, and then the other 19 weeks have to be divided between all the other countries and continents, and that's racist. I definitely was a loudmouth, hated Shakespeare, so I sure we'll get to that. But in high school, I hated Shakespeare, and I was like, what does a 400-year-old dead white guy? What does any of that have to do with me? It's just irrelevant.
Hmm.
Um, I was reading the ISIS papers in high school. I was like reading Ivan Van Sertima and They Came Before Columbus. Like all of that I was exposed to in high school, which I'm so um, grateful for. And high school is also when, even though we all had gone to elementary school together and we all had been cross fertilized, high school was the place where you did start to see that like clique start to form and not start to disintegrate again. And you could, you could go on the Berkeley High campus, and definitely see clear, like, oh, the Black students mostly congregate here and the white students mostly congregate here. And oh, there are the Chicano Latino students there and the Asian students, so you could start to see that by high school, groups have started to form. And the place that sort of broke that up a little bit was, of course, extracurricular activities. So if you were in theater like I was, or like I was a cheerleader, if you played sports or Model UN or something like that, then you might have more crossover. Um, but the education did start to get more tracked in terms of like college prep versus just people who were just trying to like graduate the best they could. And that's where you start to see the racial divide. That's where high school is where in certain classes I would start being like, oh, I'm the only Black student in this class, which then is like, okay, that's why I'm going to go over here and take this Black studies
And
class.
and do you think that's because of comfort, or do you think that's because at the time most people of color weren't really looking at going to college and you were?
I think that bigger picture, that has to do with the way the state of California determines curriculum and how that's disseminated to districts, and like the A through F requirements, which I think now are A through G or something. Um, and so I think that is a bigger system issue, that students of color were not necessarily being tracked to go to college, whether they had a desire or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, I was not great at science. And I remember I was in a biology class that was not um, college prep. It wasn't an A through F, but it would meet my science requirement for high school, but it wasn't going to meet the requirement to get to me into college. And I was in that science class with the entire JV football team. So you start to see how like, so the football team is in this class so that they are guaranteed to pass, so that they don't lose their eligibility, but also the football team is largely students of color, but not exclusively. So you start to see like, oh, other systems are at play here. Um, Plenty of students of color at Berkeley High were college bound. Plenty of them have excelled. Um, so I think, I mean, I could go on and on and on just about like our overarching educational system. I think that Berkeley High having Black studies and subsequently additional ethnic studies, like you could also take like metric classes, and there was like a Chicano studies department, so by the time I was there, other things have popped up, was a saving grace for some students who have been, I think, that like slipped through the crack or otherwise forgotten. Because again, it's the only high school in Berkeley. So there were like 5,000 students,
Yeah.
right? Like Berkeley High is bigger than some colleges.
Yeah. I mean, compared to Castro Valley High, especially when I was going there, I mean, I think I had like maybe 12,000 or 1,200 in my graduating class, maybe. It was small.
Yeah.
Like when I tell people I grew up in the Bay Area, they go, "Oh man, you must have." I was like, "Okay, guys, I grew up in the smallest, unincorporated, most racist part of the Bay Area." Um, and over the hills was Livermore, and I didn't really want to go there either. So like,
Yeah.
it was it's very interesting to talk to people who actually got more of not the urban feel, but like more of the multicultural feel of the Bay Area, because that was not my growing up at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you were looking at high school, what was your end goal? Were you always like, well, I want to go get a theater degree, or like what where how did that move you into college? Like what did
So
that
this is great because all the things happened in high school. Um, High school, I became very, very serious about being an actor. See, I was going to be on Broadway. I was like, I, I was hardcore gonna be an actor. Um, which also to me sort of meant I don't really need college, like, you know. Um, However, neither of my parents is a college graduate, and they both had aspirations for me to go to college. They weren't like strict about it. It was just like hey, you have the grades, like it'd be great. So I played that game a little bit, and I remember my college counselor was like, "Yeah, I don't think you'll," because I was like, "Tish, NYU, School of the Arts, or UCLA," because I was like, "Well, I'm gonna be an actor, like Juilliard." And I remember the college counselor being like, "Yeah, you don't have the grades to get in any of those places." And I was like, "Cool, so I just won't go to college. Like it's just not like it's not a big deal." But we were poor, and so I got the like fee waiver for the Cal State system, and
Mhm.
sort of out of spite, I applied and just submitted my application to every one of the Cal States. At that time, it was like 19. I think it's up to like 23, 24 now, but at that time, it was like 19. And I got into all 19. And so
Wow.
then I was sort of like, why didn't I just like, why did I listen to her? Why didn't I just apply to UCLA, or why didn't I just apply to NYU? Like, you never know. And like, Juilliard was audition based. Like, you never know.
Mhm.
I maybe could have gotten in.
Except they
Um,
don't have a musical theater program, and that's something that everyone like. They don't. Juilliard doesn't have a musical theater program, and everyone does not realize that. Like you guys can't go study musical theater at Juilliard.
I was so obsessed with that movie Fame and then the TV show Fame. And like that, I was like, where do I do? I want that. And so I thought that's what Juilliard was. I thought Juilliard was Fame. Um, but then I got into every single Cal State that I applied to. Also, like I said, I'm 17 years older than my youngest sibling. So my mom gave birth to them October of my senior year of high school. And
Oh,
so that's also around the time when you're applying to schools. And I was like, I don't want them to not know me, right? And foolish, 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 but I'm gonna just tell the truth. I was so in love with my high school boyfriend, like so in love that I was just like, I don't want to move away. I don't want to move away from home. I don't want to not see my little brother and sister grow up. I'm in love with this boy. I at the time thought that like I was gonna marry him and we were gonna be together forever, like 17-year-olds do, right? And college just wasn't that big of a deal. So I was like, of all the Cal States, I was like, San Francisco State has a brilliant theater department. I'll just go there and I'll just be a commuter student and like life will be fine. And that is, so ultimately that is what I decided to do. But in high school, again, talk about like the opportunities I had at Berkeley High. We performed in a real theater, the Florence Swimley Little Theater. It's right next to I don't know what they call it, the Berkeley Community Theater. And so I remember so many people that I was friends with that went to other schools that were like performing in like the cafetorium or the multi-purpose room. And I was like, no, we perform in a real theater with like real lights, real equipment. So such a gift that I didn't even fully appreciate at the time. And also, um, our drama teacher, Diane McDonald, she must be named. I can say her name. Um, she was so interested in having the diversity of students that went to the school participating. So she programmed like Douglas Turner Ward's Day of Absence. That's like the first play I did in high school. And this is a play about a town where all the Black people disappear. So the play is written for all Black cast to perform in whiteface, sort of a reverse minstrel show and explore what it is in this southern town on a day when all the Black people disappear and how quickly you learn that like without this core group of community members you can't get anything done.
Yeah, it
It's very similar to that film A Day Without a
I
Mexican.
was gonna inspire that move. That was what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
That was one of the
yeah.
inspirations for that film.
And that's like the first play I did in high school. Now, of course, we did not have an all Black cast to do it. So maybe problematic in the, on retrospect, because it was very multi-ethnic, uh, Black, white. I mean, we all were in there and we all still wore the white face makeup. But maybe it sort of meant like it went over the audience because it wasn't an all Black cast doing it. I don't know. But for me, it was like, to be 14 exposed to Douglas Turner Ward, who I would later learn as like, a hero of the American theater and specifically Black arts movement and Black theater. We did The Wiz, which, if you remember, was the first show I ever saw. So to be a sophomore in high school and get to perform in The Wiz, that was like amazing. And I mean, she did other stuff too, Agatha Christie, and we did Chorus Line and Cabaret. I mean, she programmed like really ambitious stuff and held us to a really high standard and high accountability. And we were performing with a live orchestra. I just was talking to somebody 2 days ago who was like, yeah, my high school musicals, we just use tracks. It was canned.
That is what they do nowadays. I mean, most community theaters use tracks now. It's sad. It
I
really is.
just
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I didn't even realize as a sort of entitled, smug, smartass 16-year-old drama kid. Like, I also got my first opportunities to direct in high school. And our drama teacher always, she cast the show, but then she always selected students to also be assistant directors. And there would always be like four of us, six of us, like she would cast so many. But um, but we would do this thing called pre-tech, which now I understand she was using us as light walkers so that we were there the day before tech so that they could write the lighting cues. But even that taught me something about technical theater, about the role of being a director. And for me, it felt special because it was like, here we are, the 4 to 6 sort of like advanced drama students that get to come in on a Saturday, and she got us pizza and we got to hang out in the theater all day. And I loved it. So I would love being her assistant director. Um, and then when I, graduated, she let me come back too and work as a drama specialist in the theater department. So I mean, uh, Berkeley High was an amazing experience all the way around because I really um, had like that strong core in being able to take those Black studies classes that really helped me in terms of like the development of my racial identity. And that was paired with a really amazing performing arts department, really like ambitious programming. Um, and those two in concert, I think really kept me alive during, teenage years are hard, right? You're exposed to I mean, there's drugs, there's sex, there's drinking. I'm watching some of my friends get pregnant. I'm watching some of my friends drop out of school. People are getting shot. I mean, like it was, like there's also a lot of other stuff that's going on in the world too. And at such a big high school, like I said, it could be really easy to like fall through the cracks. And I have people who were really checking for me. I had teachers who were really holding me accountable, who really expected to see me in class. And if I didn't show up, um, they were going to ask about it and they wanted to know where I was. And, there was a lot of violence. And some of my friends transferred out of the school as a result of violence. And um, I remember there's like 10th grade, I had like 27 days absent. And the drama teacher said, you know, you have to come to class if you want to stay in the play. And that's what kept that the whiz kept me in high school. Doing the whiz kept me in high school. I was I was like so over every part of it, and having to like show up to school, not just rehearsal. You can't cut all day and then come to rehearsal. You have to go to school. Um, So I'm so grateful to have gone to Berkeley High and for that experience at Berkeley High. And by the time I was in high school, we had moved to Oakland. I was no longer actually living in Berkeley. I mean, by the time I was in high school, we had moved to Lafayette, Moraga, Emeryville, like we had moved a lot. Um, and um, I was able to always stay in Berkeley schools.
That's awesome. Well, and it's great that you had a theater program that introduced you to that stuff younger and to multicultural theater younger. I mean, I grew up with. I mean, I had a phenomenal theater teacher. I had a phenomenal theater program. It was just. I mean, I Commedia dell'arte, which
Hmm.
is great, and Roger and Hammerstein and Into the Woods, I think was the edgiest thing that we did. I mean, I know Godspell was probably the edgiest thing that we did. So yeah, but now you're in college,
Yeah.
and how did that because I mean, I too did the whole, I don't, do I really need to go to college? I want to do theater and that, like, but now you're in college, and you, something must have bit because you became an academic in many, many forms. So how did that happen?
Yeah. College was hard. The transition to college was really really hard. And now being a parent of a college graduate, I have the added perspective of like the way we sort of expect 17 and 18-year-olds to have any clue about anything is wild. That transition was really hard. I went to San Francisco State, which did then and continues to have a really phenomenal theater program. And it is a heavily impacted theater program, which means they have a lot of students in the department. And because it's a state school, they get a lot of students that transfer in at the junior, senior level. So for me, starting as a freshman, I was not cast in anything. It was so big. I was really lost. And of course, I had opted to be a commuter student, so I was taking BART, our version of the subway or whatever, um, to get there. So I wasn't like hanging out or I wasn't staying late in the city because I needed to get back to the East Bay. Um, so I felt really, really lonely and really, really overwhelmed. So I had some great classes during the 2 years that I was at SF State. met some professors that I stayed in touch with throughout the years. But ultimately, when I went back for my third year at state, I just I just dropped out. I just slowly stopped going, and it felt like everything was everything was a mess. I felt like I wasn't getting cast, and at that time, in terms of my acting journey, I was auditioning for everything too, like student films and feature films. And so I was getting work outside of school, but I wasn't getting work in the department. So I wasn't making friends. Um, so I just felt like really lonely and bombed out. That third year, I just bombed out. And um, and at first I was like, yeah, I don't even need to finish. But then I was like, you're so close to graduating. All you need is a campus where you can park your car, because like parking at San Francisco State is a joke. I was like, all you need is a campus where you can park your car and where somebody will sign a piece of paper that says you have a theater degree. And that led me to the place where we met.
And I was
So
just saying that's a perfect place to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we'll lead into that whole area.
Step into a dystopian future unlike any other with The Insan Mincer, a groundbreaking queer novel that redefines the genre. Meet Rilex and Salmont, two figures bound by love and destiny as they navigate the treacherous Badlands, confronting ancient tribes and facing the relentless pursuit of darkness. Ushered by mystery and devotion, they must unravel secrets and confront their own truths in a world on the brink of collapse. The Insan Mincer, a riveting exploration of love, identity, and resilience. Coming soon to paperback and Kindle, and will be available at all major bookstores and Amazon.com. Embark on this groundbreaking journey today, created by Robert Jerome Pagan.
Hello, everyone. So you're watching the interview with me and Dawn. But as always, I need to kind of advertise myself a little bit. Please subscribe to our channel, like and follow. Watch all the movies that we have going on our channel and through our multiple festivals, and follow us on Instagram at rjeromep, and follow at Pagan Stories. And this episode is sponsored by The Intimancer, my queer sci-fi book. I really, really, really wanted to do something that I could enjoy as a dyslexic and as someone with a shorter attention span. And so I really hope that you pick up a copy of it, and it will soon be out as an audiobook. Pagan Stories, like I said, is sponsoring this video. So please go and follow and like Pagan Stories. And if you can, support us. We have other books too. But right now, all our books on Kindle are 99 cents. And check out our new audiobook, Pagan Scary Stories. Now I'm back with Dawn, and now she's left Cal State, and she now is finding a college that will sign a piece of paper for her. At this point in my life, I am a sophomore, just stopped my sophomore year in high school, and I'm a little wee. I wasn't little. I was pretty big. I think I weighed like 200 pounds then. But I was sophomore in high school, and I met Dawn at Cal State Hayward, which is now Cal State East Bay. I hate that they did that. Like I prefer the Hayward. And just to give you guys a little bit of background on that, Cal State Hayward at the time had the option for high schoolers to dual matriculate into college. And for some bright idea, my parents were like, it's smart for you to leave Castro Valley and dual matriculate at a college and do theater where where you've been sheltered all your life, and then you're going to go to a theater on a college campus. But that's how we met. But before we talk about your impact on me, let's talk about Cal State Hayward's impact on you, and then
okay,
we'll talk about your impact on me.
uh, Cal State Hayward, um, in terms of like place, has had the single greatest impact on my life. So, um, most of my very best friends that I have to this very day are human beings that I met on that campus. You, before the break, referred to me as an academic. Those were seeds planted by faculty at Cal State Hayward. All of my early adventures, um, traveling out of the country, all as a result of Cal State Hayward. And I mean, I went there thinking, Dawn, you basically have like 1 year of college left. You're just going to knock it out, right? Like they have parking and they have 4 theater faculty. They have a theater department. You're going to be fine. And then, of course, I ended up being a student at Cal State Hayward for 5 years and then continue till this day to work there as a faculty member when opportunity allows. So, I this you were talking about the dual matriculation and what I started summer quarter, and I think they don't have it anymore. Now they're on semesters. A lot has changed, but I think that was so perfect for me to start that summer quarter because they had the Highland Summer Theater Program where
Mhm.
we did 3 shows in rep. And I remember I went to Regina Cate's office. She was my advisor. I'm first day on campus. And she says, well, my husband's directing Three Penny Opera. Just show up on Tuesday and you could be in the show. No audition. And so the first 3 shows I did at Cal State Hayward were without an audition. And that's coming from San Francisco State where I couldn't get cast in anything. So right away in my first 2 terms of school, I'm in shows. I'm meeting people. I'm making friends. Highland Summer Theater was like theater all day, all night. Your tuition was paid. It was like a dream come true. It was like summer stock. It was summer stock.
Oh, some sort, yeah.
And we just built community. We would have cookouts and we'd be in the scene shop and we'd be loud. I mean, like it was just like you rehearse 3 shows all day. So you had your like morning show, then you take a break. You have your afternoon rehearsal, then you take a break, and then you have your evening rehearsal. And it was like a dream. And so I loved being at Cal. It was finally like, oh, this is college. This is where you meet the person that's gonna be like the best man in your wedding or like your bridesmaids. Like this is where you meet the person you name your kids after or whatever. Like none of that has happened. I am not married. I have been to and in weddings of some of my dear friends that I met at Cal State Hayward. My daughter is not named after any of them, though. Um, but but it was everything.
Yeah.
And um, and I took classes with Edgardo de la Cruz, who's just, I mean, if I mean, his impact on anybody who did anything with him is just so profound. He's the reason I'm really a director, even though I had directed before I met him. um, it was the way his approach to directing that was like, oh, plays
Mhm.
don't have to be boring. Like, because I was an actor, so it didn't, this will sound awful. I was an actor. I was responsible for my performance in a play.
Yeah.
And I was responsible for me doing good work, for me listening and responding. It wasn't for me to know if the audience, like, what they thought of the play. So, like, yes, I could do a kitchen sink drama and be really good in it. As a patron going to theater, I'd be like, this play is kind of boring. Not, and I really only liked going to musicals at the
Mhm.
time. But Edgardo was such a mystic and was so into like expressionism and so into the integration of dance and movement that working on plays that he was directing was unlike anything in the whole wide world. And then studying as a student in his directing class, where it's like, no, and you can have these people up here dancing while this thing is happening. It unlocked everything for me. And I was pleased, pleased as punch. And of course, the year came that I was supposed to graduate, and I was like, I'm gonna stick around to just like I'll just stay that extra year, make up for that year I lost when I dropped out. And then of course during that year I got pregnant, which then extended my stay a little bit longer. But um I tell people all the time that like everything because I now have 2 graduate degrees in theater and
Mm.
they are great and I'm grateful for them. The experience of those degrees was not about learning new information. Everything I know I learned from my teachers and my experiences at Cal State Hayward, now East Bay. My degree says Hayward, thank goodness. Um, so yeah, and of course, doing that work in the summer program where we were like cross fertilized with high school students was so thrilling. I mean, I'm still in touch with Jessica. I still keep up with Ashley, like Patrick. I still, like I
Well, yeah.
still
Well, and
follow the crew.
that and that's what's so weird is there's so many of us that went those 3 summers that are so big outside of, Cal State Hayward. Patrick ran circus theater for what, 4 or 5 years, like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like it's just crazy. And that, I mean, that was my, we'll move over into how you impacted me, because I mean, realistically, Highland Theater very much, I always say, saved my life almost,
Mm.
because as much as I had a great theater program in high school, being the Puerto Rican, I didn't get seen very often. And so like I'll cry because
Ah,
and so I never got cast in a Shakespeare show in Castro Valley. And so that gave me oh, well, Shakespeare is for white people. I got cast as Horton the Elephant was my big thing. So I must be a fictional character, right? And then I go to this college, and I remember and the show that we did first together was Roar of the Grease Paint Smell of the Crowd, which in its own right is such a crazy show. And I did not know what the commentary of that show really was until years after being in that show and looking back and going, how did Mariana and Edgardo, were they able to do this? Because I learned so much from that period. And Edgardo was brilliant. I remember him teaching a musical theater class, and he made me sing Staying Alive. And and to this day, I just remember, if you're on stage and you're singing, you have to move your hips. Why are you so boring? You're just
why are you so
so boring
boring?
to watch. And he has boys in the band with a giant phallic piece on the middle. Like he was just crazy, and I learned so much. But the show that you impacted me the most was directed by Melissa Hellman, who's also going to be on the show. Another person from the Cal State Hayward crew, As You Like It. And it was the first Shakespeare play I had ever been in. Shaking in my boots, I dyslexic, can barely read. I felt like this was ancient poetry. Didn't even know what was going on. And Melissa Hellman's a brilliant director, and that show did not feel like ancient Shakespeare at all. It was alive, and there were the pit. I remember the pit rose, and there was that wrestling
Wrestling the
arena,
cage
and
match.
and the song "Electricity" was. It was the first time I had ever heard the song "Electricity" was in that show. But you did the famous "All the World's a Stage" speech in that show. And I was an extra, pretty much. I was Sir Oliver Martexon, but I was in the bar and I had to sit there during your entire speech. And I remember going, holy shit, people who look like me have the right to do this. And for once, it just all clicked. And it changed my life forever. I ran Renaissance fairs for 10 years. I write Shakespearean adaptations. Like, it changed my life forever. But just watching you in your world, it broke something. It broke that veil of I can be, which is so weird to hear that pretty much in the same sphere, you're feeling very much the same way about Cal State Hayward and being there in that moment. So it was just, and it's always stuck with me. And I talk to my husband about it all the time. I'm like, well, why don't we ever do As You Like It? I just don't want to ever, I can never direct it because I've already been in what I feel as the perfect production. But yes, so that's, I mean, forever. And then obviously I've watched other things and I've seen other things as you grow, and like Melissa, but that moment forever will solidify you as an impact in my life and why I continued with theater. And I didn't, and Cal State Hayward, and they're gonna hate this, is the reason why I didn't go to college. It's why I went to conservatory, because Highland summer program was conservatory. So instead of going to college, I went with Cassie Maggio to PCPA, and every like
Yes.
so I my whole thing just continued, and I just went with them, to PCPA, and I was like that little kid who just followed the people I idolized to the other places. But yeah, that was the moment. So thank you for that, Dawn.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, you're welcome. And then let us both thank Dr. Melissa Hillman, who is a hero of mine. I was just yesterday telling somebody, because I'm in a period of feeling like deep burnout. Like you said, it's a weird time. And I was just reflecting on how theater, time again and time again and time again, had saved my life. And when we were doing As You Like It, my daughter Jordan was very, very little, very little. And I remember there was a night where I tried to call out of rehearsal because I didn't have childcare. And Melissa called me, and Melissa was like, bring her to rehearsal. And just that care, that like lack of judgment, that like just because you have a kid now and doesn't mean, like, no, come to rehearsal, bring your kid with you to rehearsal. And Melissa was a long time idol of mine because I mean, she did all the things I wanted to do. PhD. She also was raising her very young daughter at the time when we were doing all these plays. Um and I just was telling that story yesterday about As You Like It when I didn't have childcare. Most was like, come to rehearsal and just bring your daughter and it will be fine. And also As You Like It is when I met Ulysses Alcala, who is like one of my dearest friends and like the
And
greatest
his
costume
has done
designer in the
costuming
whole
for
world.
you too, right?
Yes,
Uh, did he do the one at Oregon Shakespeare, right?
he did Merry Wives
Yeah.
in 2017 that I directed. And this year, I don't know when this will actually air, but this year at OSF 2024, we're doing Jane Eyre. He's doing the costumes for that too, right? And that summer, I mean, like Courtney worked on As You Like It, and talk about somebody whose wedding I was a like maid of honor. I mean, like Courtney's one of my best friends. Marissa Kelty is one of my best friends, and she was in that show, and I was in her wedding too. So see, that's what I mean. Cal State.
Well, and those
uh,
summers were just they were just so impactful. They were
oh,
for everyone.
I I mean, I tell people all the time that starting in that summer program was the best sort of point of entry to then be a student at Cal State Hayward. I mean, much of the other stuff outside of the theater department honestly is a little bit of a blur, but like, yeah, I finished college. Like I got a college degree, whatever I needed to do. But it was really um because of that. And it's such a small department. I mean, like 30 majors. It was a very small faculty at the time. And of course, like there were people like you who like did Highland summer theater and weren't necessarily like full-time Cal State students all year
Yeah.
round, but like I mean like would still do other shows even outside of the summer. Like I
Cabaret.
mean, it's that
Cabaret with Monica.
yeah, I'm like, I'm just like, weren't you guys students? And then like, and like Jessica always has to remind me, like, I did not go to, like, I was not, I did not get a degree from South State Hayward. But it's like in my memory, you all were so integral to the whole, you guys were always there. Um, but you're welcome, and I'm so moved to hear that. And I'm so glad that you know that there's a place for you in Shakespeare. I have on this funky background, but I'll see if my tattoo will show. Uh, it says non sans droit, and that is the motto on the Shakespeare family crest, and it means not without right. And it has been sort of like my artistic purpose and motivator to make sure that people understand, especially people of color who were students like us in environments where maybe I was only exposed to Shakespeare in boring English classes. My drama teacher was not even trying to do Shakespeare, and you were made to feel like you couldn't. Uh, to remove those barriers of access so that students of color know that if they want it, not that they have to have it, if they want it, there is a world for them inside of Shakespeare and that it is our birthright. And I feel like anything that has been used as a tool for my oppression can be used as a tool for my liberation. If I want it to be, I also can put it down and walk away. If I, so I don't believe in this idea of like Shakespeare the supreme. I don't believe that like, oh, everyone must love Shakespeare. I think if you have an interest, you can find something that will resonate for you inside of those plays, whether it be playing, I mean, kudos to Melissa Hillman, right? Playing a queer identified, sort of masculine presenting Jaquees who gets to say, all the world's a stage, as you like it set in the bar. I agree. Like,
Yeah.
I have directed it since then and found myself being like, like the bar, like Melissa's idea to set it in a bar was just
It's
like,
so
it was
good.
brilliant.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. And, like the crew that did it, I mean, like I just Cassie, Marissa, Nate, John Nagel was in the
It
show.
does.
I mean, like, it was just, I mean, we just, it was, we had a blast. Lindsay, Sean, I mean, it was just a blast. It was such a blast. Um, but it's been sort of core to my work as an artist and educator to remove those barriers to access to sort of all of the precious Western canon, but specifically Shakespeare, because once I found it, or once it found me in a way that made sense, it has really been like a gift to my life as an artist. It's been a gift to my career. I do find it to be some of the greatest poetry um, uh, in the English language. There are many languages that I cannot read or speak, so there might be far greater poetry in those languages. And I think we have to stop forcing Shakespeare on people who have no interest whatsoever in Shakespeare. Like, it's their win, and if people want it.
Yeah, I also think that the one thing that I learned from that group, especially when it comes to Shakespeare, is it's supposed to be fun. Like, and I think the one thing, and most of you had worked at the Impact Theater underneath a pizza place doing
Yes.
Shakespeare. I mean, so like we were shown a different way to Shakespeare, and I think even with like Eduardo, like when I direct plays now, and when I write plays or when I produce films, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of dance, and I'm not a dancer. Like it's not anything that I ever would have considered myself to be, but like there is a lot of those things, and a lot of that was curated from that area. Now, being 20 years later, literally almost 20 years later, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, you played the character in Roar the Grease Paint that like now
Hmm.
I don't even know if we like could someone do that show today with it even being like I don't what would the context of that show like it's
Yeah.
so problematic. Can you explain that show to me?
Yeah.
Because I've been
So,
waiting for years. How
well,
did
and
you
it's
feel in that
interesting
role?
too, because the deal I made, because I had very specific terms in order to do that. So I played the character of the Negro. That is the name of the character in the script. In a sort of subversive turn of events, there's Cocky and there's Sir, these two like British-based characters, who sort of represent the have and the have-nots, right? Like the 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 underfed and the overfed, and they're playing a game that, it's like a game of croquet. Um, and of course, the haves is winning, and it's back and forth, back and forth. The Negro sort of shows up out of nowhere and beats them both, and then sings the famous song that everybody thinks is like Nina Simone or Jennifer Hudson or Michael Bublé, but it's none of them. It is actually Anthony Neely's song. Feeling good, right? Birds flying high, you know how I feel. It's a musical, it's a show tune, people. It is a show tune, now widely regarded as a jazz classic. So the Negro beats them at their game, and then sings this beautiful liberatory song and then saunters off. Um, I think a lot of thought would have to be given into configuring a production of that show that makes sense today. Edgardo, of course, did cast it multiculturally.
Yeah.
However, the idea, right, is that the disadvantaged outsider actually comes in and beats these two white characters at their own game, because these two white characters are too busy like debating the wrong thing, right? Um, I don't know, but for me, I was like, they couldn't find somebody to play the part, no surprises. And I was really apprehensive about playing a part that was literally not even named, just the Negro.
Yeah.
And I was like, I will only come to rehearsals for that part. That is it. I will come in, I will sing the song. I'm not going to be at rehearsal for anything else. I, I mean, my terms were very specific. So I sort of parachuted. I mean, I sort of was like a cameo, honestly,
Yeah.
because I was not a part of any of the other intricate ensemble work that you all did. I just showed up, did my number, and that was it. Um, uh, but you see how I make sense of it, right? Is that it is that outsider that, because their need is so greater, because these other two are arguing about the wrong thing, that the outsider can come in and actually win the game. I think that there is a very subversive and important message in that. And I am not going to spend my money to sit and watch a show that is all white actors, except for the 3 minutes that a black character appears, sings the 11 o'clock number, and then disappears. That's not how I would spend my entertainment dollars. So if somebody was producing that show today, they would have to get very creative. Fortunately, our production, like I said, what was
It was,
multicultural. You were in it. Sam was in it. So there were other people in it.
yeah.
I think I just was the only black person.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had yes. And then we had the Filipino exchange students.
Yes. So I mean, it wasn't an all white cast,
It
and
was
there was some
no,
like
no,
gender
but
bending because Lindsay
I was gonna say
played
Lindsay.
Sir, which was
Yeah.
a phenomenal choice.
So the things that I do love about that show was Lindsay and your numbers. Like Lindsay was phenomenal in that show. Like it was great. But yeah, now that I think about it, all the urchins, and this is because Edgardo is just freaking smart as hell, and I did never thought about that. We were the multicultural, and
Yes.
we were the rainbow
Yes.
in the costuming, because I was Violet. I still have my costume that Courtney made tucked, tucked away somewhere. But yeah, so I mean, like I've always wanted to ask you that question, because it's a show for me that I just didn't know that how that would have affected me at that point in time, because it was
Yeah.
a very harsh show. But then in the same season, here you are doing all the world's a
Yeah.
stage, and so like it was really, you had the dichotomy
Yeah.
of that
I
going.
think I think I understood that it was subversive. I think, for me, I was like, yeah, it was probably real subversive in the 60s, and
Yes.
maybe in the early aughts is just, maybe there's something, but I was grateful to do it, and that song from that show is iconic, and and the fact that I got to sing that, you know, and that Mariana worked with me, um, and like brought in a clarinetist just for me.
Yeah, that you, Mariana, the music for that show was really pretty. It's an interesting show. I wonder who would dare to do it now, though. I wonder.
Yeah, a lot of Neely Bristow's musicals are not getting
Uh-uh.
produced. I mean, also
Oh,
they're British, and so in a U.S. context, there's also an added sort of layer, like, um, and like maybe that's great, but also like maybe there's a barrier for for us to like,
because they
you know,
because he also did Stop the World I Want to Get Off.
yes,
And like
yes.
that's the most famous. I mean, like that's probably the most famous that everyone knows. But
Hmm.
now, and after reading Eduardo's directing his book as an adult, I kind of get it now a little bit more because
Yeah.
he had an interesting way of looking at musicals that nowadays people look at musicals like that. Like we look at musicals the way that Eduardo looked at musicals nowadays. Like Hamilton is a byproduct of people like Eduardo who broke that boundary and made us look at musicals in a context of they don't always have to be,
Yeah.
they can actually be a story and you can
Yeah.
actually connect. So Dawn, what's next for you other than the amazing amount of books and stuff? And you kind of hinted at Jane Eyre. Uh,
Yes.
so what's that
Yeah.
perspective?
So right now, at this very moment, I'm in rehearsals for Legally Blonde, the musical at Occidental College. That will open April 19th. So that may be after this airs. I have no idea. But doing Legally Blonde. And then from there, I'm going to Oregon Shakespeare Festival and doing Jane Eyre. And then later this summer, in August, I'll go to American Shakespeare Center and direct Merry Wives, an 8-actor Merry Wives. It'll be my third time doing Merry Wives. Each time I do it, the number of actors gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So it presents a new challenge. And yes, I have a few writing projects. I just finished up a screenplay that my agent is reading. I'm working on a serial Kindle Vella romance under a pen name. And last year I released a book of poetry, and I'm anticipating um, in the next 2 years to release another book of collected writing, some poems, some essays. So I'm keeping busy with some writing projects, and some I'm hesitant to call it film work, but I have some video projects that I'm working on. Not nothing like feature length, but
Yeah,
I'm working on some shorts.
film's a different world. Like you know, now that I'm kind of settling into this, I used to be called the theater guy. Now everyone's like, "You're the film guy." I'm like, "No, really? Am I? Have I hit that level?" But it's just it is a different world. Now, probably like the biggest question that I have for you is since 2020, the landscape for people of color and Black plays and Latino artists has, I would say in 2020, we had this big resurgence of we're going to support, we're going to
Yeah.
see all that. Since then, what do you think that effect has been? Uh, and what do you see as the landscape going forward? And what's the major thing we need to work on to
I worry that I'm going to sound like a pessimist. I think that that regional theater is in trouble. I think the nonprofit model for theater is in trouble. So I think the business model needs reevaluation. I think um, what we're learning is that a lot of commitments made in 2020 are not being sustained when theaters are faced with like COVID recovery and trying to get patrons back. So I feel like some theaters are doing what they said. Some theaters were doing the work before, and it wasn't about let's issue a statement and put up some hashtags. That was the work they were committed to before. I feel like some theaters that like only just discovered, like equity, diversity, and inclusion, or as a result of some of the movements like Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, a lot of that was coming out in 2020 and during the pandemic. Um, Faced with economic hardship, that is not they are not able to fund that particular value and are maybe doing um, material that to me seems safe or um, conservative. Um, And so I think for all theater people, doing theater, regional professional theater right now is a challenge because the money is not there. Funders are changing their priorities. We don't get any real civic government subsidies to make this art. And then I think the same way we always have had to work 2 or 3 times as hard to get half as far, that artists who have any aspect of marginalized identities are having to work even harder, um, while theaters might try and lean into like the optics of, look, we're doing the work. You still see that like C-suite, who's in leadership, who's on those boards. Um, it just still does not truly reflect the diversity of gender, race, ability, thought, ideology that exists. Um, and for me personally, because theater was shut down for so long and I picked up a camera, I am finding myself really excited by some of the opportunities in film and television. And of course, right when I was like, I'm gonna be a screenwriter, then like the WGA went on strike and then SAG followed right after. So I mean, I know that film and TV is also in its own sort of recovery period. I just feel like I am seeing a lot more representation um, happen and a lot more individual artist agency. Like I can make a movie right now today with the equipment I already have and release it on any number of platforms, and engage with community. And that's exciting for me. I hope to always be a theater maker. And I also am really interested in my own autonomy and my own agency as an individual artist.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is something that I had to come to face with within 2020. I mean, realistically, I went from running a community theater and doing theater, forever, and then picked up a camera and kind of now on 4 seasons of a television show, 2 features, a bunch of shorts, running film festivals. And I found that yes, I could find more of an individual voice and that community that I was looking for with inside film. But at the same time, there's so much elitism, I think, across all the aspects of things that BIPOC and queer film is still the same struggle. It's just a little bit easier to do film now. Whereas when I was growing up, that was not the case. It was easier to do
No,
theater. Like I think that's why a majority of people of color became theater makers, because we couldn't have a camera because it was just
yeah,
like
it was
film
expensive.
was
It was
expensive.
cost prohibitive. We didn't have access to that technology. It wasn't in our schools. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah.
so and I think that yes, now as an adult, I'm definitely finding that new autonomy. And I think that you're like, as you said, it's new, it's fun. And I will always want to be a theater maker, but I also think that I'm making theater in different ways now. Like
Yes.
I have a novel coming out on Shakespeare's birthday called Verona Outpost. It is a queer sci-fi. It's actually a part of the same series, and it is a queer sci-fi Romeo and Juliet in an outpost invaded by Trumplicans. So it's a crazy, like I think that is a way that now I'm taking Shakespeare, is I'm using that as a catalyst to
Yes.
speak to different people. And I think that theater, and we're making that into a film soon. So I guess that will be my theater maker type of thing. But I mean, Jane Eyre, I'm very looking forward to that. It's one of my favorites. It's like one of my favorites. And Oregon Shakespeare always does such a great job. And speaking of regional theater, like that's a place that has had a lot of turmoil just because of funding. And
Yeah.
I know that there's been plenty of, like, a lot of the theaters that I loved in the Bay Area. I don't live in the Bay Area anymore. I'm in Vegas, but like when I lived in the Bay Area, like all those theaters are closing because of funding and because of the ability and the model. You said yes, like it is a bad model, and community theater isn't even existing anymore because of the AB5 laws and things like that. So like
Yeah, it gets tricky.
it's just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
whole weird thing where film, I guess it's just a little bit easier. Everyone has an iPhone now, right? Like everyone has an
I
iPhone.
mean, that is the thing. Like, I don't want to be so naive as to pretend that there aren't any barriers to access, because of course there's still a cost associated with this technology. It just is a much more democratic process in terms of I can make something, I can post it on a social site, I can direct people to that social site, and if it gets enough views, I can monetize that content and I can be paid as an artist. I mean, I know that that's a sort of reductive timeline. I know it takes a lot of time to build these like social followings, and yet with just this little thing that we carry in our pockets, we
Mhm.
can make content. We can make some high quality content, and we can release it. Um,
The, the
and
the movie that I won the New Jersey for, I always tell people I won the New Jersey Film Festival with a movie that I shot on my phone. I wrote in 5 days, and we filmed it in 10. So like it really like that was the moment that I was like, oh my gosh, people can hear my story,
yes,
and I think like you were saying, it's totally easier. It's easier and a lot more, I think a lot more direct to the audience.
yes,
Whereas like where we're trying to find in
yeah,
theater, like you're pushing out a net and two or three people are going to connect with it, right? But in film, they don't connect right away. They're not going to watch it. But everyone who watches the whole thing ends up getting something out of it.
yeah, yeah. And I never want to leave behind live entertainment,
Mhm.
and I'm watching like how live music, how these like live experiences are are getting patrons that the theater is not getting. And we can say that it's money or whatever, but my daughter saved, and she definitely dropped $300 on a ticket for Beyonce, right? And the people, they're going to the Stranger Thing experience, they're going to the Bridgerton experience. People are paying money to go to Meow Wolf. So it's price is a barrier for theater, to be sure. When we talk about like $300 and $500 like Hamilton and Hadestown tickets, however, your local theater pushing the like 15, $20, $30 ticket, like there are people who can afford that and just aren't coming to your theater. And I so they don't feel invited, they don't, it doesn't feel relevant. That so I'm still really trying to tease out like what is the live, what is the immersive, what is that, and how can theater embrace new technologies, new uses of old technologies to um to continue to try and stay relevant while it ebbs and flows. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like theater is dying. Like, theater is a
No,
gazillion years old. It's never gonna die,
it's an
but it is
evolutionary.
gonna ebb and flow. And right now, I think people just aren't that interested in sitting in the like velour seats and have actors like talk at them for 3 hours. That's just not the experience that many people are wanting right now. So what is the experience that they're wanting? I'm interested in that interrogation.
And so I on a quick note before we end, like for me, I agree because I spent 10 years running a Renaissance fair, which is like the most immersive type of atmosphere. And the Renaissance fair people always would tell me, Robert, no one will sit down to watch a Shakespeare. And I said, watch. If we do it immersive, if we make it a part of what's going on, if we make Oxford the one who's sponsoring the show, if you have the Queen going, people will get, and all of a sudden now they do, now that they have ingrained an hour Shakespeare in their stage schedule because people went and they watched. They were, what? He turned Richard III into a musical on stage, And so, like, all of a sudden, it's really about how you approach everything,
Yeah,
and immersive. Being in Vegas, immersive is everything right now. Like that's immersive, immersive, immersive. Everyone wants to get scared or feel, or they want,
yeah,
because we were locked up for so long.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's the buzzword. But I'm teaching an immersive theater class right now, and what I want the students to walk away with is immersive is not one thing. Immersive is many things.
It's so much, and exactly. So, and we did before the pandemic. I did Puffs. I directed it inside a brewery, and we had all the audience members sorted, and we had butterbeer, and we had hippogriff pizza, and like it was immersive. They weren't in the show,
Yeah.
but they were in the. There's so much going on, and like Guys and Dolls right now over in Britain is an immersive experience that they're
Yeah.
doing in the West End. So there's so much going on. Well, thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you for having me.
I know everyone's gonna love this, and I know that people from our past are gonna be like, "What? Robert and Dawn in one video?" So they will enjoy that. But is there anything that you would like to say to the future to give them some inspiration, like one little thing to keep them going?
Yeah, it does require a stick-to-itiveness. So just keep going. Just keep going. And don't let anybody make you feel like you have to keep going for free.
Yes, that's very true. There is a limit. There's a limit to exposure, right? I always say, like,
Yes.
after directing my 50th play, I don't need the exposure anymore. I do need the pay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Have a great one.
Step into a dystopian future unlike any other with The Mincer, a groundbreaking queer novel that redefines the genre. Meet Rilex and Salmont, two figures bound by love and destiny as they navigate the treacherous Badlands, confronting ancient tribes and facing the relentless pursuit of darkness. Ushered by mystery and devotion, they must unravel secrets and confront their own truths in a world on the brink of collapse. The Mincer, a riveting exploration of love, identity, and resilience. Coming soon to paperback and Kindle, and will be available at all major bookstores and Amazon.com. Embark on this groundbreaking journey today, created by Robert Jerome Pagan.